Very pleased to be able to speak with Guy Verhofstadt, 3 times Prime Minister of Belgium, and then a leader in the European Parliament, and the original negotiator for the Brexit phenomenon, I would say.
I'm coordinating, in fact, in the European Parliament, the negotiations for Brexit. But it's not finished, as you know. We still continue because we are now waiting for the team of the new Prime Minister. We will see what will happen. And so,
actually, when I think about Brexit, we know a lot about what the British have put on the table and then taken away and put it on the table. What we don't know is the coordinated view of the European Parliament or the EU. How would you describe it? What's the sentiment?
I think for once there is a coordinated view. So what is not a given, and what is not so easy when you have 28 member states and 3 institutions, because that's what we have. 27, in fact, member states. Plus the 3 institutions, Commission, Council, and the Parliament. And there is a common vision. The common vision is that we deplore, first of all, the Brexit, because we think that we are stronger together, that Britain and the European Union are stronger when they are together in the Union than with the Brexit. Secondly, we want an orderly Brexit. An orderly Brexit means without disruption for the UK and for the EU. And 3, we don't want or to have a Brexit that creates troubles for the single market. The single market is an enormous achievement of the European Union, and we want to keep this single market alive, and we don't want to give in on the principles of the single market. And the principles of the single market are what we call the 4 freedoms: the freedom of movement of goods, of services, of capital, and of people.
And I would add another goal that you might want to be thinking about, which is the conditions in which Brexit even became possible in the first place.
I see Brexit as a failure. The fact that Brexit is happening is a failure of the Union. It's difficult to say, oh, the British are going out of the Union. Fantastic. No, absolutely not. It's a failure of the Union. It's mainly the European Union is still a weak organization. Let's be honest. And why? Why? Because it's not a real union. It's still a confederation of nation states, of 28 nation states, governed, managed by the principle of unanimity. And unanimity is weakening an organization, because everybody has to be on board before you can act. So the main description that you can give about the union is that it is a union that's always acting too little, too late. And that's because of this institutional weakness. And this institutional weakness is, in fact, is still the unanimity rule. So the fact that Brexit could happen is also a proof of the fact that this European Union needs to be reformed the fastest as possible, and very deeply reformed. For example, the abolishment of the unanimity rule, to give only one example.
Do you have to be a liberal to believe in the European Union? If you were conservative, you would take more than you give to the Union, which is where the forces are now today.
Yeah, it's not necessary to be a liberal, but you need to have a federal view on the future of Europe. Federalism is important. I think that federalism is an enormous step in mankind, because it's the possibility to govern with different cultures, with different languages, with different nations, a territory on this planet.
Is the World Trade Organization a form of federalism?
No. It's a World Trade Organization is not. Federalism is India is a federal state. The United States of America is a federal state. Germany is a federal
Anything with
state. Canada is a federal state. So I give the example of India. Why? Because there you have 2,000 nations. You have 20 different languages that are used, and you have 4 religions that are practiced. So that's, you cannot say that's a nation, India. No, that's a continent. It's the biggest democracy, and at the same time, you have all these religions, languages, and ethnicities, that you can govern such a continent, big continent, with one organization, with one federal organization. That's, I think, a huge step forward in mankind, because what federalism is doing, it's not centralism. It's not giving all power to the capital. It is saying, look, we're going to do it together. What we can do better together, we do together. What we cannot better do together, we do it on the lowest level possible in the local communities.
What is, in your view, a achievable goal in federalism, achievable shared goal in federalism that we should all aspire to?
On the European level, for example, take defense. The way we do our military defense in Europe is a waste of money, and with a lack of collective security, because we are duplicating everything 28 times for the moment. And the consequence of it is that we have the second biggest military budget worldwide in Europe. We spend more or less 40–45% of the Americans on military, but we are only capable to do 10–15% of the military operations of the American army. So that means, I'm a lawyer, so I'm not a mathematician, but I know that it means that we are 3 times less effective than the Americans. Why? Because we are not putting all this together in one European defense community. So federalism means put it in a European share it in a European defense community, and if you do that, you will have not only the second biggest budget of the world, you will also be the second most effective.
There, you're going to more closer to unitarism.
No, it's sharing sovereignty. You know, everybody is talking about, in a federal state, a European federal state, I will lose my sovereignty. But that's bullshit. Sorry that I'm using that word. Why it is bullshit? Because sovereignty, what does it mean, sovereignty in the modern world, if you are not capable to decide yourself? For example, on military, when there is something happening in our neighborhood in Syria, and there is a peace conference, well, Americans and Russians are coming together in Europe, in Vienna, to decide on it, without any European around the table. Why? Because we are simply dividing our
So
efforts.
at which point does an individual European state has the right or the pleasure of going off on its own? You know, we are in China.
They have a lot of in the European Union. There is and in federalism in general, the basic principle is subsidiarity. And subsidiarity means that everything what you can do on the local level, you do on the local level. Everything what you need to do on the state level, you do it on the provincial on the state level, you do it on the provincial on the state level. And only when you have an added value on the European level, that you will do on the European level.
Right. So when you have a country like Italy, unilaterally signing up to Belt and Road, for example, that makes all of the other European states quite, uncomfortable.
Yeah, but that's the point. The point is that we are talking about the European Union, but in fact there is not a lot of European Union.
Yeah.
The budget, for example, is a small budget. It's a budget of 1% of the European GDP. 1% of the European GDP. It's nothing at all. The American budget is more or less 25% of the American GDP. Even a confederation like Switzerland has a budget of 15% of its GDP, and we in Europe have 1%. So to talk about, to point a finger to the big European Union, it's nonsense. It doesn't make any sense, because their budget is only 1%.
Right. But then, the perception, if you look at the Greek crisis or the Italian crisis, as a percentage of the whole European economy, it's 6%.
Certainly when we talk about Greece. Greece was a historical debt in total historical debt of a little bit more than 300 billion of euro. But the GDP of Europe every year is 15 trillion. So when you come to China and somebody is asking you to explain the Greek crisis, it's impossible to explain, because you say, the historical debt is 300 billion and the annual wealth that we create in the European Union is 15 trillion. So an a Chinese economist will say, what's the problem?
Yes. So that being the reality of the numbers, when the Europeans come together, what's the defining fear? What's the defining perception issue?
Nationalism has been created by the Europeans, no? It's in the nation states, and nationalism also. Not only nation states has been created, also nationalism has been created, and it has even nearly destroyed the European continent, nationalism, in 2 world wars. Yes. In 1418 and in 1445, the Second World War. Nationalism destroyed nearly all of Europe. So still in Europe, people are still, or many people still believing, that the best way to organize the modern world is a small nation state. And we all know that the future of this world will be a world of empires and not a world of nation states. An empire like China, an empire like India, an empire like the US, like the Russian Federation. And the only thing what we have to hope is that it becomes empires of the good and not empires of the bad. But people, too many people still in Europe believe that, the European Union cannot work because there is a difference of languages, there is a difference in culture, what is nonsense, because federalism is just combining the strengths of every language, culture into an organization that is absolutely key for the survival of Europe in the modern world. Because we will defend our way of life, we will defend our standards worldwide if it is not done by the Europeans. And proof of that is the fact that the field in which we are the most successful, Europeans are most successful, is where we are combining our forces. Right. Airbus, for example, is a typical example of a corporation, European corporation, who is successful. Yeah. And without that corporation, there should be no industry, airplane industry in Europe.
Right. So, you're covering a lot of ground, Mr. Verhofstadt. When you started your political career, you came across as you were called at one point a mini Thatcher.
No, I was a libertarian.
But we're also talking about big business today. Because of technology, businesses are immediately, cross-cultural, cross-border. Here we're looking at, companies which have 500 million customers, as large as Europe, and so on. Have you changed in your orientation of how big government should be or can be in order to control?
But I think that a minimum of regulation is absolutely key and necessary.
Or should government be a player themselves, be platforms themselves?
No, I don't think so. I don't think that public authorities have the good intention or even the means to start with platforms. What we need to do on the government level, certainly in Europe, is to establish the standards, so a minimum of regulation. Standards, minimum regulation, for example, also protecting the privacy of people. Because all the data we are talking about in the modern world, these data are in fact the ownership of individual people. It are your data, it are mine data, and the problem today is that these data, without our consent, are used massively by a number of big platforms who are making huge profits with it. Nevertheless, it continues to be our data. So I'm very much in favor to find a way to monetize this for ordinary people. Why can ordinary people not simply say, look, it's my data, if you want to use my data, you have to pay it for me, instead of the system that we have today. And maybe that's possible in the future with blockchain, with tokenization, with new technologies that are emerging, so that people are still responsible for their own life.
Being a member of the European Parliament, now you have a federal view of your counterparties in other parts of the world. You have the Americans, you potentially have the British, you have China, you have potentially India, Africa. What is your sense of what you're dealing with when you deal with all of these different counterparties? Are they essentially different types of counterparties, or when you think of China, how are they fundamentally different from America? What are the issues that come out onto the table?
There's a difference. China is a big economic player, but it is not a democracy. By the other hand, the US is a big democracy, but now going into a direction of more protectionism under the leadership of Donald Trump. The Russian Federation, to give another example, is going in a totally different direction. It's more and more becoming an illiberal type of society. India is the biggest democracy, and at the same time also an economic heavyweight. So, but what is common in all this is that we have to deal with this, what I call empires, and if we want to really have good agreements with them, we need to do that together, to be strong together first of all. And proof of that is the trade policy. I think that's one of the most successful policies today of the European Union. We have reached trade agreements with Canada, with Japan, with Mercosur, that's South America. We are now, for the moment, negotiating, starting to negotiate trade deals with India, with Mexico, with Australia, with New Zealand. So there we see in a very clear way that if we are a real union, as Europeans, we can make good agreements if we do it together. Yeah. And that's, in my opinion, the mistake of the UK, to think that they can do it separately.
Yeah, in making that unified platform or unified position, you're only as good as your weakest link. And what would you describe to be the weakest link in
the weakest link is a unanimity route still on a number of issues, because then you need also the approval of the most reluctant of your members. That's the reason why the Americans in the 18th century, they started as a confederation in 1776, and they became in 1785 a federation. Why? To abolish the unanimity rule. And the rule in America is that you need a majority of 9 on 13. Why 9 on 13? Because it started like that. It were 9 states who wanted to make a confederation of it, and 4 states were against it. And these 4 states had the possibility or to cooperate and to accept the new rule of majority ruling, or to leave. And nobody left. They continued. That became the United States of America. But in effect, a federation based on majority decision making. And that is, in my opinion, still the weakest element in the European Union. That, for example, to rescue Greece, to give that example from the beginning of our interview, you need to have the approval of everybody.
Yes.
Even of the smallest political party in government in the smallest member state.
But is that a desirable goal, to be able to move the European Union towards less?
It's not a desirable goal, it's a necessary goal. If we don't do it, Europe will disappear at the end. Because it creates a weakness internally.
And do you think it's an achievable goal?
It is an achievable goal. For example, the new President of the Commission, Mrs. von der Leyen, who has been now elected by the European Parliament as the new head of the European Commission, said in her statement very clearly that in a progressive way, she wants to abolish unanimity rule, even in foreign affairs. And in foreign affairs, it's always difficult because every member state think that they need to have to continue to have their say in these matters.
So just to end this interview and maybe to bring it back to where we are today, the European Parliament vowed to block Boris Johnson's plan to ditch the Irish backstop.
Yesterday, we published an official statement of the Brexit steering group in the name of the European Parliament, very clearly saying that we want to stick to the withdrawal agreement, including the backstop for Ireland. And there is certainly room of maneuver to negotiate, but that's merely in the political declaration, that will describe the future relationship between the UK and the EU.
How much of that is personality and how much of that is something you can get around?
These negotiations, it's always a mix. Politics is a mix between institutions and personalities.
Thank you very much for this time with me. Excellent.